How's everyone doing this weekend? Maybe it's a surprise to see another live stream for the second week in a row, but the reason I'm doing so is, so last week we worked on this edit. Hello Gabriel, how you doing, brother? So last week we worked on the edit, and what I decided to do this week, I had another video edited and ready to go, but I decided to do a live stream mixing down this edit, because I get so many questions about mixing, and when I do like calls with people through my Patreon and stuff, it seems to be like one of the main things that people struggle with. So I thought it might be beneficial to go through how I approach a mix down, and this is going to be a relatively easy one because, well, I don't know, it can be complicated, but I've kind of got the basis of the track, the foundation of the original track there. So we're going to go through and then balance out the stuff that I've done with the original track, and then see how we get on, put a bit of a mastering on it so it can kind of be ready to play in a DJ set. So let's have a listen through to what I've got. We'll just wait for some more people to join. By the way, same as last week, I'm going to be my alarm's going to be going off because I'm recording it and I'm going to put it up on my YouTube channel as like proper videos. I'm recording on a regular camera, and the project files will also be available to download on Patreon, the full thing. Along with the final track, if you want to grab that as well. So just as a little refresher of what the idea is here, it's basically taking an old track and then kind of freshening it up, making it into something that can fit into a modern DJ set. Yo, what's up, Greg? So I worked on the track and added a few more elements and kind of finished it off, the arrangement basically. So this is basically where we're at. Yeah, kind of like toughened it up a bit and made it a bit more, I don't know, pushing, a bit more interesting. Just to refresh, here's what the original sounds like. So not by any means bad, really cool, which is why I decided that I wanted to do it, but I just wanted something that was a bit more hard-hitting and a bit bigger sounding. So let's get on with the mixing process. What I've got down the bottom here that I just dragged in from my Dropbox is just an export of the original track. Not the original track, sorry, of this edit. So before I start mixing, I always do this so that I've got something to compare it to. I want to be sure that I can quickly check that I'm making it better, not worse. Because trust me, it does happen the other way around. So I've got SonarWorks on that, so I'll just turn it off and just double check that this is at the start. Yep. So we are good to go. So first things first, what I do, I've done a couple of videos on the channel about like the basic idea of mixing and balancing things out. So my philosophy on mixing, and I guess it's if anyone's familiar with the concept of the Pareto principle, that it basically means that 80% of the output is created by 20% of the input. So when you apply this to mixing, I feel like 80% of a good mix is achieved through volume balance, and that's just getting all the different elements so that they're so that they are balanced relatively to one another. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the kick volume. Now I do this in a way that I've got set up. I've got a couple of videos on my channel where I go through this in detail. So I'm not going to explain all of the justification and reasoning behind it, but basically the concept here is that I'm setting a kick volume that allows me to have to set a reference point for everything else. So everything else is going to be mixed to the kick. And what I do is I have a gain plugin here, which is turning everything up that comes into the master by 7 dB. And the reason I do that is so that I can just turn this gain plugin off. It will reduce everything by 7 dB. And then I've got a pre-master basically. So without kind of overcomplicating it, yeah, it's just basically adding, it means that I can mix in with plenty of headroom and still get a mastered sounding track at the end, essentially. Excuse me. Alright, so kick volume. So what I do is I use the gain meter here to set my kick based on this like additional 7 dB, right? So what does that mean? So I know that when I add things on top of my kick, it's going to add a bit more volume. So I want to leave a bit of headroom. So I'm going to have this coming through about 3 to 4 dB. So I'm going to add another dB or two. Yeah, mate, I will share this on the channel. I recorded the one from last week as well. I'm going to upload both of them. Should be next week. It just takes a little bit of time to edit it as well, because I'm filming it on my proper camera. But everything will be up on the channel to rewatch. So we'll just decrease that a little bit. That's about where I want to be. Okay, so my bass I'm going to set next, and the bass, this is just like a really subby kind of thing. For anyone that watches my channel regularly, you will know this preset, Dark and Round Voyager from Trillion. I use it a lot, just sounds good. So how do you get a good balance between your kick and bass? The way I do it is, as a starting point, I set my bass to be 5 dB quieter than my kick. So my kick was peaking at around -4. So my bass will be peaking at around -9, something like that, -8, -9. So the thing is, I set it so it's like it's peaking a little bit hot, but I know that most of the bass that I use, most of the bass plugins I use, and the way that I produce creates a bit of dynamics in the bass. Do I usually use headphones or monitors? I use monitors. So I always check on headphones. I always check on like multiple different headphones and stuff, things that I know well. So yeah, maybe the mix won't sound exactly like it would if I did it on my monitors, but you know, it's going to be in the ballpark, I think. So I've got this plugin here, Oscillos Megascope, which shows you like basically like a printout of the waveform in real time. So where I'm going with this is, you can see that there's some dynamics in this bass line, and it's actually changing as it plays. And that's just because of the way that Trillion works. It's trying to kind of mimic a kind of analog feel where there's a bit of change in the system. So what I'll do is add, hey Ollie, welcome. What I'll do is add a little bit of compression here. I'm just going to shave off. So what I want that to do is just kind of catch the really highest peaks, just to balance it out a little bit. Okay, so let's check this again. So that should be about right. Now this is, again, this is just a starting point, but I'm going to show you how to reference something so you can kind of check that it's a good starting point. Or you can get, this is basically how I got these kind of figures, is by referencing a bunch of different tracks and figuring out on tracks that I like, tracks that sound really good in the club, that have the groove I like, what's the relationship between the kick and bass. But anyway, let's have a listen to both of the kick and bass together. So that sounds almost right. I think the bass is maybe 1 dB too low, and what's creating that is that there's some transients on the bass because of the filter settings. So I'm just going to pump that up by 1 dB. Sounds about right to me. The kick has literally got no processing on it. What I'll do is just roll off like 25 Hertz. That'll add a little bump in the volume, which I will compensate for. I actually normally work on 2 screens, so I would normally be like looking down, but I'll do it this way. How do I do that? I'll turn it off like that. Now we see the kick here, and then we'll see the volume, and then when I press Command Z, it's going to undo and turn the EQ back on. Oh, I can just do it. What am I talking about? I can just do it here. Right, so that's -11, and when I turn this on, okay, it hasn't added anything. Sometimes when I do that, it adds a little bit of a bump as it's creating a small resonance. You bought Biodynamic DT990 headphones and real phones for your production because I don't have mixing room. So yeah, I think it's a good solution. Who doesn't have, for those who doesn't have a nice room. Yeah, the Biodynamic are a really good kind of entry-level monitor or studio headphone. I used them myself for years. They're really nice. Something like this is a bit more, it's kind of got another dimension to it, but absolutely not necessary. I produced a lot of tracks and worked on a lot of tracks for other people, pretty much all on the Biodynamic. I used the open back ones. I think I used the 880, which is like the semi-open, but you get a more kind of natural sound with the open as opposed to the closed, but depends on your work environment. But yeah, if you don't have a treated studio room, you need to get some decent headphones and use them. But I'm always surprised to see some big producers that work in like very untreated studios. I guess quite a few people also get their stuff mixed down by other people, so if you want mixing, there's an email in the description. But anyway, where were we? Okay, yeah, so how to reference something. So I've got this track here, a remix from Gorge and Nick Curley of Denny's track, and I'm just going to show you really quickly how we can get some levels based on the reference track. Okay, so we're looking at the start of the track here. We can look at the waveform and see that the loudest thing is the kick. It's the low frequency, of the kick that's going to be making the loudest point. We'll see that on the spectrum analyzer here. Let me solo this and just make sure SonarWorks is off. Yep. Okay. So that's clearly the loudest point, and that is telling us on the spectrum that is at -10 dB. Cool. Doesn't matter what that number is, but we're just getting a reference point based on the loudest element. That's the kick at this point. Now what we're going to do is try and find a place where we can just hear the bass without the kick, and I know that exists in this track. Here, I believe. Right. See here, we've got the last clap, and then we've got a bass note. So, I think maybe these are bass notes too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I don't entirely trust that, so I'm just going to hit Command E, zero out some of these kicks, which I can just see in the waveform, what's a kick and what's not. Right, turning those kicks off, and then looping this bar here. And then I'm just going to bring these in a little bit so I don't get a click. And then we should see some, like, these are kind of offbeat bassline notes, right? Okay, so that one's probably a bit over exaggerated because it's got the end of the kick in there. So that's -16, so somewhere in the same ballpark is what I'm suggesting, right? We set the bass, we noted the kick volume was -10, and the bass volume is -16. Cool. So we're in the same ballpark as that track. I've played that track out a bunch of times. I know the kick and bass relationship sounds really good. We can also then kind of reference it a little bit with our eyes, because as Aerotype just mentioned in the chat, that not everyone has a treated listening environment, so the advice to use your ears isn't actually relevant for everyone. Also, when you tell someone to use their ears and they don't know what they're supposed to be listening for, or they haven't kind of trained their ears to listen for that, it's just kind of really arbitrary advice. So what I try to do is give people some advice based on how I taught myself to do this stuff when I couldn't really trust what my ears were telling me. So some of that involves visual referencing. So what we can do is have a look at the waveform. Okay, so that's what the waveform looks like for this, and we can kind of see here where the bass is, where the kick is. Obviously you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit because there's hi-hats on top of there, so that's like the bass note there. There's the kick. And then we can look at Oscillos Megascope when we solo this. We're roughly in the same ballpark. I think that I might have the bass a little bit quieter than that, but we're also going to add some limiting, and this is obviously mastered, so that's going to bring up the offbeats and change the dynamics a bit. So you just have to trust me a little bit. This is kind of a good place to start. But anyway, that's a good way to evaluate the relationship of kick and bass in someone else's track. Now what I set next, okay, let me just, actually, let's go through and delete any unused tracks. Okay, nothing in the vocal group. Delete that. Bit of bad form here. I should have been renaming everything as I went, but I was doing this super quickly. Yeah, and I think I did a bunch of it on the stream, and it's a little bit harder to focus sometimes, but I do usually rename things, or at least at this stage go through and name everything, but that's probably pretty boring for you guys to watch, so let's just work with it. Cool. That looks about right. So what am I going to do now? Turn off all that. Turn off that. Turn off the percussion. The hats. The claps. So now I've just got the kick playing. Oh, turn off the bass. So I know that I'm guilty of pretty much every track I make has the clap too loud when I start off. So do most of the people that I receive tracks from for mixing. So it's normal, because you're kind of, when you master the track, the level of the clap is going to come up so much that, and it's also kind of like very different to perceive it at a low volume than at a high volume in a club. So it can be very deceiving. Just going to check that we've rolled off some of the low end. Yep. Oh, I didn't turn these off. I'll group those. I'll change the color of that. And we'll just turn those off. So those are the samples from the original. And okay. Claps. So let's group these. It's so handy since they made like these subgroups. I know it was a few iterations of Live ago, but it was such a game changer. So what I'm going to listen for is the kick and the clap, and then I'm going to check the volume of that together. So remember, the kick was minus 3.7. So then when I isolate that, let me just turn this off, I shouldn't be adding clipping at this stage. When I isolate that, I can already hear that the clap's probably too loud, but that's actually within my kind of threshold. So I want it to be, I don't want the clap to be adding more than like 1 dB to the kick volume. So what does that look like on the waveform? Without delimiting. So pretty similar, it's not adding too much at all. What you do get sometimes is a big difference. So that's not for me. So So this looks about right, but what I'm going to do just to control it a bit more is add a little bit of clipping to just roll off some of the transients of the clap, sorry. That's why I've put them together to process them. I'm going to bring that down. Now let's have a look at what that's doing to the clap. So it's just kind of rolling off the top of the transient of the clap, but it doesn't really sound any different. So that's just saving us a little bit of headroom without affecting the sound. So now if we listen to the kick and clap and check the volume here, hasn't saved us much, but we're just kind of controlling a little bit. Now I'll add a little bit of reverb to the claps. I've got a reverb preset from Verb Suite Classics that I use. Just a plate here, and one thing I like to do is time the pre-delay to my track, and I know for 125 BPM that we want this to be at 30 milliseconds, and if I set the decay to 900, close enough, we'll be in time with the rhythm of the track. So I just really want that to be subtle. Without it, cool. Nice one. Now what I could do is just maybe pan these claps a little bit and pan that one a little bit right. Cool. Now what I'm going to do next is the hi-hats. So let's go to this part here. And what I want to do basically is check the hi-hats all together. Oh. Okay, so that one's got a clap in it, so that's going to screw up my claps up there. It's annoying, but it's a cool sound. It's adding some cool texture. What I normally do with this, with a top loop like this, is I adjust, right, so I have pulled down the clap a little bit, and I've called it top loop. But anyway, we're just doing a rough thing here, so let's just check. So what I'm checking here is I'm going to balance it by ear, but what I don't want is for the hats to be peaking above kind of 5 dB, because I know then they're going to get very harsh when I add limiting. So we're in a pretty good range here. So, and there's also some hats and things in the original. although I have EQ'd them out a bit. There's still kind of, same with the clap. It was unfortunate, but in the original I couldn't get rid of this kind of really long part of the clap. I would have liked it to be a bit tighter. I tried EQing it out a little bit, but you can still hear this kind of washy sound. It actually sounds kind of cool with the tight claps now. Kind of grooves together. Anyway, let's work on these hats a little bit. Right, so from the start, okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of random pan to that, just so it's moving around ever so slightly. 16th hat, it's moving around quite a bit. One thing I will say about mixing in headphones versus mixing on monitors is in headphones the panorama is much more exaggerated, so you want to kind of almost feel like you're overdoing it a little bit probably. So I'll pull these closed hats out a little bit. And then the open one. Sounds about right. Let's turn the top loop off. So I'm just listening to how does the panorama create any separation in the hats. Then with the top loop, cool. So what I'm going to do now is loop this part here. I'm going to pull down this whole hat group by about -20. I'll just type that in, -20. Then I'm just going to bring it up until it sounds about right. Just using the arrow keys on my keyboard. It got to 0 where it sounded right. Cool, that's a good sign. So I'm just going to turn it up to 6 and then bring it down until I think it sounds about right. Two. Okay, so what I'm going to then do is average the difference of them, which is +1. And I'm going to tell myself that that's about right. What I'm doing here is always checking back to, I mean, the more you kind of visually reference as well. So this is, I'm always listening and doing things with my ears, but as I said, I've got a lot of experience doing things visually as well. So I'm always checking back with my eyes, and I've got kind of different things like this oscillos megascope, the spectrum. I'm always looking at this shape in the spectrum, and I know I can read what it means. I think a lot of people have like spectrum analyzers like that. Some people have external ones in their studios. Some people have like a whole extra screen dedicated to having a spectrum analyzer, but basically you can read it and know how, if certain things are too loud in your mix, if there's too much highs, if there's too much lows, you're obviously going to fine tune everything based on what you're hearing, but these are just like really quick, easy ways to get like things in the right ballpark. Cool. Now we're going to look at the, we've got these rides. I tend to mix rides last actually, because if I mix them now, then I add some processing onto the drums. It's going to bring the rides up and they're going to be too loud. So I just kind of mix them in at the end after I've mixed all the drums. So we've got a cool top loop that I added, or percussion loop that I added, and I've just taken out any highs on that. The drums, I think I did those in the last video. What I'm going to do to these is, so I've got it in a drum rack there. I'm going to go to controls here, add in pan randomization, about 4 or 5%, and then I go copy value to siblings. So that's going to copy it to the other, it's going to copy it to the other simplers that are in the drum rack. Right, so now if I go to this one, hit controls, it's got the same value there. So that means they're all panning randomly. And they also, I'd already set them in the panorama so they were kind of separated a little bit. Now this is just going to help them to feel a little bit more natural. What I'm going to do now is use the velocity device with the add some random preset, just to add in about, I don't know, 4-5% or 5 velocity value points. I don't know what the actual unit is called. 5 velocities, and that means that basically every time the note plays, based on the velocity here, which I think is 100, velocity 100. So that means that randomly determined, each one of these notes is going to be somewhere between 95 and 105, which just is going to give a bit of a organic kind of, a bit more humanized organic kind of feel. Nothing over the top. Then I'm going to add in a bit of compression just to control those dynamics a bit. Looks like I'd already done that and I probably turned it off for this. Cool. Then I'm going to add in a little bit of saturation. I used a bit warmer preset. And basically all I'm doing there is adding a bit of coloration to make these sound more similar or unified. Now that's adding some volume. I'm going to bring the dry wet back. Now I'm going to use my levels, levels here to check how much I'm adding and adjust for that. So without it, okay, so I'm actually decreasing the volume, interestingly enough, with that saturation, even though it sounds perceivably louder. I guess it's just chopping off some of the peaks. So with that, I'm going to do the same process as I did before to level it. So that's -12. Let's bring it down to -25. Okay, that sounds about right to me, -17 there. I'll put it at 0, it's going to be way too loud, and then I'm going to bring it down. Minus 18, so let's put it at minus 17. Now that might have been, so I had it at minus 12, but when I put on the saturation it added quite a lot of perceived volume, so that's probably the reason for the quite big jump in, or drop in volume. But it sounds about right, and yeah. Next, let's add this loop in. Now I just wonder how this might sound if I pull in the envelopes a bit. So it sounds like it just cleans it up a bit, but it does sound a bit loud now. So I'm going to bring that down to like minus 20. Okay, that sounds about right. So minus 6. Let's bring it up. Minus 7, so let's split the difference and go minus 6.5. Negligible. That the difference of 1 dB is not really a huge deal. I think actually I'm going to bring it down 1 dB. Maybe bring this back up 1 dB. So it's just like, yeah, so I kind of do things based on like some numbers and some visual referencing, but then in the end I'm always using my ears and figuring out what's going on, what sounds better, right? But it's great to have a place to start that's getting you in the ballpark. Another great tool is Melba Multi-Analyzer. You can monitor each track and show you in the GUI what's competing. Okay, I don't know it. Sounds cool. I've tried out a few different things, like there's something from Isotope that where you put the plug in on each channel and you can mix it like visually around with the like panorama and the level. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like a cool idea, and like when they show it on the videos, on their promo videos, you're like, whoa, got to have that. But yeah, but maybe Melda, okay, if people are talking about it in the chat saying it's good, I might have to check that out. Okay, snare fill. So that's there's also already a snare fill in this loop, right? Or is that not that loop, this loop? And it sounds like they're playing at different times. So So I could try moving this around a little bit. I think what I'm going to do is just turn that snare fill off, to be honest. I don't need two snare fills doing the same thing. DJ Emo, have fun at the park, mate. Family first. Okay, got some clap fills here. Going to add some big reverb on that. Cool. That's about right to me. I've got one more thing in this percussion group, which I was actually thinking about replacing. It's just a kind of fill sound with a tantra on it. I've got the tantra at 55%, so it's kind of just putting that glitchy vibe on it. I'm not sure. So now I'm going to do a bit of processing on the drums. Oops. Threshold. What's I doing here? Okay. So because of the way this is set up, it's normally triggering, because of the way I mix, it's normally triggering on the offbeat hats. So it's kind of bringing that down. It's happening very fast based on the transients, so I'm trying to control the transients here. And then I'm going to add up about 1 dB. Oh. So where's the bypass here? So it's very subtle. It's just controlling the transients and bringing up the other elements a little bit, kind of just thickening out the drums a little bit. But you'll see I do a few different moves here on the drum bus. I pretty much do the same things to different amounts on each track, and yeah. That's kind of, I guess that's what gives it my sound of my mix. Parker, good morning. So what I'm doing here, this is just some parallel compression. So I'm just trying to get that so it's about 10 dB of gain reduction, and then I've got 10 dB of makeup, roughly. And I'm just adding in a very subtle amount of that. I can just show you before and after what I've done. So very subtle. Now a bit of decapitator, just adding a little bit of saturation. if you hit the mix there, you can see a percentage. So I tend to anywhere up to kind of 15%, but that would be at the high end for me. So let's have a listen. So you can hear it's really subtle, but the drums just start to feel a bit thicker. It's bringing up some of the quieter notes, so they start to feel a bit more alive. This is why I'm always saying don't put too many top loops and stuff in, because when you bring all those things up, if everything's getting louder, it starts to get really chaotic, and it just starts to sound mushy. You lose all your transients, get kind of start cancelling each other out and fighting for space. Now I'm going to add some widening with ozone. So I have this set to 6 milliseconds. It's a bit wide, but I generally then just pull it down to suit. Like I said though, I'm listening in headphones, so it's important to make it sound a bit wider, or kind of overdo the width a little bit, just because it's being accentuated, because I've got the left sound coming 100% from the left and the right sound coming 100% from the right. In the real world, that's not really how things will sound, like in a club. So again, that's subtle. So hopefully you can hear how that is starting to sound like just a bit more polished, a bit thicker, a bit kind of like everything's kind of gelled together a little bit, but it is, again, very subtle. Then I'm just going to bring this virtual channel up to about 0 dB. The reason I'm doing that is because at the end I like to add some drive, and if I'm kind of pushing everything up to the limit, then it adds the drive in a way that I'm used to, basically. In case anyone's interested, the way I got put onto these Slate Digital plugins is by my buddy Neil Barber, aka Nina Helena, super talented producer from the UK, based here in Berlin. Yeah, fantastic. I used to have a studio in the same building as him, and he's like a fantastic mixing engineer and engineer in general, and he showed me these plugins, and for mixing and stuff, they're really so good. He also showed me this kind of trick with these. So shout out Nina Helena. Alright, then I'm going to add a bit of reverb. So this is just coming from my return drum verb here, another Slate Digital verb suite with a drum plate that I've kind of created, 100% wet, and I'm just sidechaining that to the drum bus. So basically it means I can add in quite a bit of reverb, but then the drums are ducking away the reverb, so it sounds quite natural. The drums sound quite punchy, but then it can be quite reverby. I don't know, give it a go. I like it, I like the way that it sounds. Oh. So I know a good starting point is minus 25. So let's have a listen to. I'll just turn on the sample so we can compare it. Okay, turn on the bass so we can compare it. Alright, so I need to put my limiting back on. So I'm always trying to kind of listen to what I'm doing with some limiting on, not overdoing it, but getting it to a kind of relative loudness, because I know how I want it to sound in the end. I don't know, there's loads of advice out there saying don't mix into a limiter. It works for me. You do what works for you. But this is how I do it. I mean, it's house music, right? Or club music, right? It's going to be limited at the end, so cool. The hats are sounding a little bit quiet. I turned these down. I might turn them back up by 1 or 2 dB. Another good reference point that I can check is here, where my hats sit, around 10k. I want that to be peaking somewhere between kind of 52 and 48. That lets me know that I'm in the ballpark of like where I want to be. We can check that against a reference track. Let's just copy this limiter with the same settings up to this Gorge and Nick Curley remix. Drop it in. I've already got this limiter here, but spectrum analyzer here, but it's got different settings. So this is the same settings. We can compare it. So it's sitting right around the same place. Sorry. And again, I'm using a track here that I've been playing that I know works in the club, sounds good, sounds punchy, doesn't sound harsh. So if my hats are sitting in roughly the same volume range as their hats, I know it's going to be good. Anyway, where are we? So, anyway, I'm just going to take this sample out again. Basically, this is what I do first. I get the drums and bass all fine-tuned and sounding good together. And then I bring in the rest of the elements. So for this track, obviously, the main sample is going to be the most important rest of the elements. So what I'm going to do is basically the same thing I did before. Bring that down, bring it up to what sounds about natural. Do the same thing, bring it in, bring it down to what sounds natural, and see where we're at. So we're at -6 now. Let's bring that down to -20. These like starting point numbers are relatively arbitrary. I just want to have a place where I can hear it, and then it's a point to bring it up from. Okay, so I got -7 there, so let's bring that up to maybe all the way up to 6. Way too loud, bring it down. -5, okay. So I had it at -6, and that's like right bang in the middle of what I have referenced from listening as being the right volume, so that works for me then. And I mean, it sounds about right to me. So now can we compare here? So it's pretty, I mean, it's not such a complicated mix. It sounds like I did have it pretty close to what I've got now initially. Let's just check the loudness on this though. Okay, cool. And the loudness here. Yeah, similar. Well, same roughly. Good. So now let's mix in this organ bass. So it just sounds a bit too loud now. So I'm just going to bring that down to -15. Cool. What I might do is add on a transient shaper here, and what this is basically going to do is similar to controlling the envelope like I did on this, so tightening it up. So basically it's kind of like a compressor, but it's kind of like turning down the volume from here to here. And that's just to make this organ bass sound a bit tighter. Now I just want to check if I'm adding any volume. So I am, so I'm going to, this should have a gain in it, but it doesn't, so I'm just going to take that down here. That before the LFO tool. Now I'll just check inside the M1. Here I've turned off the effect, I believe. Insert effects. Aha. Let's try that. Doesn't seem to make any difference. Okay, cool. Happy with that then. Let's see the saw layer. Sometimes I'm listening to these things and going, they're not even necessary. idea of this is to give the bass a bit more definition. Bring that down to -25. Yeah, okay. Cool. Nope. Okay, so what have I got there? I've taken this little piece of the original track, which comes from the end, like here or something. Yep. And I've just copied that because it's got this effect sound, which I want to be, it's kind of panned to the right side. I want it to be a bit more enveloping and a bit more intense. So what I've done is copied it from here, put it onto another channel, and then used the utility with the swap left and right. So now it's going to put the pan signal onto the left, and then I've taken that and just detuned it by 5 cents. So now these two together sound like versus let's just check if that's too loud. Sounds good to me. Now, yeah, so that's how I've processed it. So I've just taken out that frequency where the clap is, because I don't want it to be doubling up again, and then cutting out any lows. And then this thing at the end is just an effect sound, which is just sampled off the end here. I thought it would be like a nice little ode to the original, to tuck it in at the end there. Alright, so we've got another couple of melodic elements. This acid up, this is a really cool sound. So it's super simple arpeggio. Just we're in the key of D minor, and it's literally just playing D over 3 octaves, right? It's got quite a bit of reverb on it. Might pull a little bit of that back. Let's see if it's got, it might have reverb on in Diva as well. Yeah. Let's see, does it sound good with that? So this sound, it's really cool but I want it to be pretty subtle because I don't want it to take over from the original too much or kind of interfere with the groove too much. If I turn off that original sample, you can see it fits in quite well, but then with the original it kind of pushes it back in the mix a bit. We'll try the mixing, the balancing technique. I'll just go -20. Right, okay, so that got to -10. -11, so we'll just keep it at -10. So I'm always checking those volumes. I kind of do it to ear when I'm working, and then at this stage I'm just going through and checking things. To be honest, like the most important thing for me in the balancing of the volumes is getting the drums and the bass and the kick all sounding nice and tight, and then everything over the top of that is kind of like setting what's the most important element, setting the volume of that, and then making sure that that's continually audible and continually punchy or sounds the way that you want it to compared to the other things. Then I've got this pad. So it's like a cool effect sound, just really adding some drama in the break. Just a preset from Diva, ring modulators, and I am just playing with the cutoff. So I've just gone through and, where are we? Oh. Recorded some automation on the cutoff to give it a bit of life. With that, what I'll often do is just draw it in with the mouse and then go through and record it again. So I've got this kind of rough idea of what might sound good, and then I go through and record it and give it a bit more humanization just by doing things with a controller. So what I was doing there is just kind of riding that volume through the break and just adjusting it as I felt it was getting, you know, to figure out what I felt sit best. And that seemed to be about right. Holding control and moving that allows it to be fine. Well, sorry, holding shift and moving that allows you to do it in more fine increments. So that's what I do. And with the EQ, I'm just pulling out some of the low end. No LFO tool or anything, because it's not, I don't need it sidechain pumping because it's not playing against the beat. A micro break would be nice at this point. What do you mean? Like where you kind of stop everything and then Yeah, what does a micro break mean? Joyful wave. Then let's have a look at the effects. Got a crash. Cool, I've got a crash fill here. So I just want that crash fill to be really subtle. I might add a little bit more pan randomization to just bring it out a bit wider. Cool. What have we got next? This is a riser. Bring that down a couple dB. Okay, what's this? Is that snare fill too loud? Hard to tell right here. Now we've got these percussion fills. I might need a couple of dB. What's the track called? Nesta, sorry. The original is called Tijuana Groovers in the Air. It's the Moonface remix, and it came out in 2000 on Bedrock, I think. Let me just check. Tijuana Groovers in the Air. Moonface. Discogs. 2001. Came out on Bedrock, the absolute classic label from Mr. John Digweed. Okay, so we've got some more risers and things here. Okay, I want that. Something about this that's not quite sounding right. Maybe a bit too loud. I have to put a LFO tool on that or something. Maybe I'll put the LFO tool after, I don't know, before. It's a little reverse. This is a great benefit of like using your own sample pack or creating your own sample pack, is then it already has your own processing on it. So I don't need to put any like reverb and stuff on this because it's already got the reverb that I use on it from my sample pack. Underground Shades of House on House of Loop. But I always recommend to people that you kind of create your own sample pack as you go as well. Like, so when you finished a track that you're happy with, bounce out some of the parts that you can reuse in other tracks. And then every time you want to make a reverse cymbal, you don't have to make one from scratch, and you can kind of use sounds that then these little kind of things that you reuse add up to form your kind of signature sound. Oh, that's tasty. could put one of those in the break if there's a room for it. Kind of unnecessary. Don't know. Oops. Okay, so let's bring that up. So just sending that to a big delay that I use. Alright, that sounds pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is add a little bit of master processing. I'm just doing a very subtle clipping here, just to really take off some of the biggest transients. Now let's see where we're at with the volume. We've still got plenty of headroom here, so I'm just checking that, and I've always got room to move if I need to pull that down. What we're going to do also is, I haven't done my kick and bass processing, which I do actually normally do at the end here. So you'll hear that just kind of fills it up a little bit in the low end. Kind of gels everything together, and if you were watching from the start, you would have seen that I mentioned my bass, kick and bass were a little bit further apart than in volume than what was in the Gorge and Nick Curley remix that I was referencing. But now that I'm adding in this processing, it's kind of pushing them closer together. You can see that here on the oscilloscope megascope. Now, once I added the bass, kick and bass processing, I could hear that the clipping was doing a bit too much. Cool. Now I'm just going to set the input for the virtual mix bus. Then I'm going to add a little bit of drive, which is going to kind of boost the bass and the highs a little bit. Now I can hear I'm getting a little bit loud into the limiter, so and I might be going over on here. Now that I've added extra volume, so I'm going to bring this down to 6, because I've got this extra headroom that I can play with. Going to add a little bit of glue compression. This is looking like a bit of a plug-in soup, isn't it? So let's just minimize some of these. This is really very, very minor glue compression. Did I clip or limit some of the buses? I just grouped the claps and clipped them. I haven't clipped anything else. I sometimes do that on, if I've got like a track that's got a lot of percussion, then I might do some clipping on the percussion. If there's just like crazy amounts of transients. Now we need to turn on the ride, don't we? See, I turned it down by 3 dB because it sounds too loud now, which pretty much happens every time, which is why I leave it till last. So now, the reason I use the L2 is just because it's, I don't know, cheap and easy and does what it says on the tin. But I'm going to use the FabFilter Pro L2, and what I'm going to do here is just be taking away like a maximum of like 1.5 dB of gain reduction. use another instance of the Pro L2. These are both set to oversampling at 4K, which is what the clipper is set to as well. I'm just turning that up for no reason because it's not even turned on. No, that one. Okay. Now we can check against the original version. Maybe the bass is 1 dB too loud. Alright, so that's sounding about right to me. Let me know your thoughts in the chat if you've been watching along. For some people this is probably not going to be the most exciting stream. For others this is going to be exactly what they wanted to see. So, you know, it's no how to sound like the Beatport top 10 anyway, but this is what I view that people struggle with kind of the most. Anyway, so hopefully it's been really helpful for some people, mildly interesting for others, and there's probably some people watching this who think I'm a complete idiot and doing everything wrong. But that may be the case, but at the end of the day, it's about what it sounds like at the end. Shit. Alright, well, I couldn't record the end of this because my memory card is full. I should have deleted last week's stream. That's unfortunate, but like I said, I'm going to edit up the video and post it, and I'm going to edit up the video, post it, and I'm going to post this project into Patreon so you can download that. And I guess I'll have to do myself a little outro for the video when I post it. Yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the process of this kind of creating a DJ edit. It's something I do pretty regularly, and I mean, we've done this in 2 streams, 3 3 hours 40 minutes with a bunch of chit chat. So you can see it's a pretty quick process. I did a bit of editing in between and added in a couple of elements like this ARP and this, and to be honest, a lot of these effects and stuff I dragged in from old projects, and yeah, pretty easy. Like normally I would say for one of these from start to finish we're looking at about 4 hours, because you know it's at the end of the day you're making this. I mean, it sounds good, but there's definitely something missing, which is the heart and soul of the track, which is this. I think those rides are still a bit loud, eh? Maybe I'll just bring them right down to -30 and bring them up. And I'll bring that up to -10. Cool. So yeah, I mean, if you followed along and you saw what I was doing, it's not a super complicated mix because everything that I was adding was designed to go with what was already there. So there's very little that's kind of sitting on top of each other in the frequency spectrum, which makes the mixing process much easier. But that's also the approach I try to take when I'm writing tracks. So yeah. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed watching along, and let me check. Yeah, I'm still recording on here. Cool. So thanks for tuning in, and next week we're back with a regular video. All right. Well, have a good Sunday, and we'll talk soon.